Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Ryan and Bethany Board Game Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about Nova Lux. This is from Dragon Egg Games, and basically what's happening in this game is the universe is collapsing, stars are burning up, they're disintegrating, they're dying, their energy is just flying across the universe, and we are the survivors. We are trying to save as many species as we can. Let me show you how it looks on the table. Alright, here's our personal player board. What we've got is we've got 5 different resources, and we start off with 3 of each of them. And you can kind of see there's right down there on the 7 mark on each of them. That's kind of the breaking point. What we're trying to do to finish the first half of the game is to get 7 of each resource. Once we do that, we are able to afford to put our colony down. So we are kind of basically trying to build this colony. Why are we building this colony? Well, basically because the universe is ending, and there's only all these planets are kind of starting to die and expire, and all the survivors from all these different galaxies are making their way on these safe havens, these Arks of Salvation, and we are the ones who are kind of piloting these different random factions and species to their new and probably final home. So you have a bunch of these different faction cards, and everyone's going to start off with 4 of them. What's going to happen is you're going to kind of draft them. So you're going to take one, pass the rest, take one, pass the rest, until you end up with 4, and from there you're going to choose 3 of them. So maybe we end up with something like this. We've got these guys over here. Alright, so those are going to be our 3 factions for the game. So remember, the first half of the game is just trying to get to that 7 of each so we can build our colony. The second half of the game is satisfying the conditions that make these factions happy. Alright, so on the top half of the card, they give you an ability throughout the entire game. So for instance, this one here says, once per turn, you can turn those purples into, which is artifacts, into either life forms, water, or oxygen, which is great. Similarly, this guy up here, he can turn basically the life forms, the oxygen, and the water into each other. And this one allows you to move diagonally on the board. Normally, you can only move up, down, and left and right. So they all have different qualifications they want you to hit in order to meet their satisfaction. So for instance, this guy over here, he wants you to get to 14 of the hydrogen on your board. So remember, you're probably close to 7 already, but maybe you have to spend some to move around, that kind of thing. But if you can get all the way to 14, you're going to be able to flip that over. That one now is complete. However, you also lose the benefit from the top half of that card. Here in the middle it says collapse 4 stars. That's going to happen when you basically remove all the hydrogen or all the resources from a planet, from a sun, or a star. So you want to do that 4 times to satisfy that character, that faction. This one says be able to produce artifacts in your biosphere engine. So basically, when you start collapsing those stars, you're going to be able to pull them into your own player board, and they're going to give you extra actions as well. But what that's basically saying is make sure that one of the ones that you do collapse has the ability to create artifacts in order to satisfy that faction right there. So that's really all there is to your player board. You do have a little handy guide here reminding you what your actions are. Basically, in any order you want to, you can move, you can harvest, you can use your biosphere, which is what we talked about, like using the suns that you're going to be collapsing, and you can use the top row of your factions as actions as well. And you're going to end the turn by taking a hydrogen from one of the suns. All right, so now let's go to the main board. Alright, so we have a 4x4 grid of all these different stars. Now, depending on the player count, some of the stars have actually already collapsed, limiting how many different actions and resources are out there. So we're set up here for a 2-player game. 4 of the suns have already collapsed, and they can do things like make a wormhole, which can kind of give you some extra ability to teleport. They can just, be space dust, like the one up here. This is just nothingness. There is these gravwall kind of things over here. Those take you 5 hydrogen to escape from that, which is not good, so you don't want to get stuck there. And then just flat out places like this, you just can't go. They're just dead space. You just can't go there. All the rest of the spaces on the board have a yellow sun that you're going to be kind of spinning all the different hydrogen on, and then it's going to turn into a red sun. Same thing, you're going to have some more conversions there. Once you use all that hydrogen, then that spot is going to become one of the different 4 kinds of dead stars. So when you start the game, you're going to place your little Ark of Salvation anywhere on the board. And that's going to be how you have flyer on the board. But you can start off right away by doing things. We start with 3 each of the resources. So we can do this, turning those the artifacts right there into hydrogen and oxygen, we can do it as many times as we have the resources. So we start off with 3 of each things. So maybe we want to do 3 of the artifacts, in which case we'd be able to gain 3 hydrogen and 6 of the oxygen. We would move this marker down 3 times. 1, 2, 3. That is the harvest action. There's also the move action. Basically what you're going to do for moving is it takes 2 hydrogen to get off of a tile. So 1, 2. And it takes 1 oxygen, or I keep on saying oxygen, 1 hydrogen to get onto another tile. If you're on kind of an empty-ish spot like the wormhole or the space dust up here, it only takes 1 to get off of those. However, it takes 5 to get off of one of those over there, get off of one of those black holes. As you're moving around, especially in the higher player counts, you are going to run into other people. Let's say someone else's Ark of Salvation is right there, and you spend your 1, 2, 3 oxygen to move where they are. You have 2 choices of what you can do there. You can either trade with them, which is great, or you can attack them. When you trade, there's basically no rules. You basically can never trade nothing. But you could say, hey, you know what? I'm really low on water. I'll give you 5 artifacts if you give me 4 waters. Or whatever it is. You can make up your own trading scenarios, however you want to do that. However, if you attack someone while you're moving around, basically what's going to happen is you are going to roll dice. So I would roll 1, my opponent would roll another. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the value of those dice, and you're going to add to that value whatever your lowest resource is. So for instance, if we just spent our 3 artifacts and we're down to 0, we would roll our dice. Let's say we got a 5. We'd have 5 plus 0. But then, so the other person, they only rolled a 3, but they had, their lowest thing was 3. You'd add that to theirs, so they would have a 6, 3 plus 3. In that case, they would win the battle. And the winner gets to take some resources from the loser based off of that die roll. If you ever take all the hydrogen away from a planet, I keep on saying planet, I mean sun or star, you go to the next one, this is the red sun. These conversions are a little bit trickier, but they're usually also to your benefit and a little bit more fun. So this one says you have to trade in 4 resources, but you're going to be able to get a hydrogen, plus you can teleport somewhere. That can be really, really strong. And, again, once that happens, 5 times in this case, you're going to have this card over here and reveal what that was. However, these cards right here, the ones that you kind of spent all the oxygen from, all the hydrogen from, you're going to be able to put this next to your personal player board and use that action for yourself now, which is really, really cool. The only difference is, down here, basically it says you have your life forms, and you're going to get hydrogen and, artifacts. Let's call them purples. Purples to get you a yellow and 2 reds. What happens with that yellow, the hydrogen, you pretend it moves up top. So then you have to basically pay a purple and a yellow in order to get 2 reds. So that's how it works when one of those stars becomes your own biosphere card. That's really all there is to the game. You're just kind of roaming around the board. You're doing all these different conversions of all these different resources in order to eventually be able to place your colony. Once you have your colony down, then you're trying to roam around the board, get all the different resources in order to satisfy what your 3 factions need in order to win the game. First one to complete all 3 of the factions and build a colony is going to be declared the winner. I don't know if you guys caught it or not, but there's some species, some of the factions in this game, they have some crazy card art. I think they did a really good job of making, brainstorming what different species might look like if they were developed in a completely different environment than what we on here Earth are used to. That's always been intriguing for me. Some of them even look like, some kind of crazy deep sea monsters, or some kind of, when you've seen those pictures of microscopic little dust mites or whatever, where you zoom into the smallest possible zoom in magnification, and you see these tiny little bio whatever, there's these crazy teeth and stuff. It's insane. And I thought some of that was reminiscent of that, which I liked a lot. Bethany, I would think she would want me to point out that she was a little bit grossed out by some of them. She even would draft factions based off the ones that didn't gross her out. So that was kind of funny to see. This game had a really easy setup and tear down and play, frankly. It was so easy to teach because everything made sense. You trade this goods in for these goods. When you set it up, you're just setting up, basically what happens when the planet collapses, the red version and the yellow version. And you place the hydrogen on there where it belongs on the marker. And the trading made sense. Everything was very intuitive with this game. It's very simple to set up. This is a game that you can teach to anybody because it just kind of makes sense. I did not mention it during the overview, but there's these Federation cards. Kind of gives you a special ability as you're playing. But in order to activate that special ability, it's kind of like the factions, right? You have these special abilities at the top half of the card. But in this one, you don't get the special ability until you've reached some kind of milestone. Maybe it's having a whole bunch of life forms and maybe a whole bunch of biodiversity and a little bit of oxygen. But when you get to have that, you have some special ability that only applies to you to trade goods around or whatever the case is. So I really like having those Federation cards. It says not to play them in your first round, which I agree with to an extent, but at the same time, it doesn't add a whole lot of complexity, and you don't really get a chance to use them until more or less the late game because of how high some of the requirements are. So it doesn't hurt you that bad. We played a lot of two-player games with this, and I will say in the two-player games, there's not a ton of interaction, but when we started to add more players, you get a lot more of that interaction, you get a lot more of that competition, a lot more chances for battling when you're in the same space as someone else, and also trading. You don't have to be combative, although in all the plays that we had, we didn't ever trade. We were just always constantly battling each other, trying to take resources that way. Plus you get to roll some dice, which is always fun. Engine building, one of my absolute favorite mechanisms in any game, and this had some really cool engine building. You might draft a card, or not draft, but you take down the oxygen or hydrogen of a card all the way till the end of it, so that way you take it down as one of your own biosphere cards, and then at that point, it's part of your own personal engine. So you might go to a planet, or here I'm saying planet, I'm so sorry, a sun, or a galaxy, or whatever it is, where you're able to convert life forms into oxygen. But then the card you have turns oxygen into double versions of life forms or whatever it is. So you have this synergy that you're building between all the different cards. I loved how that worked out, especially once you started having your own biosphere cards. They really added into what you were capable of trading out and doing on your turns. The resource management, again, that was just a really interesting way of doing the resource management. The trackers, all was right there. Everything was all just laid out for you as you're going along. And I liked how you had to get a little bit of everything. You couldn't just get all the way to the top on a couple of things and then forget about the rest. No, you had to get a little bit of everything in order to build your colony, because you need all those different resources in order to build your colony. And plus, you don't want to ever get caught with having hardly any resources of something, because then you're going to get into a battle with someone and you're going to lose a whole bunch of resources that way too. So you guys, Nova Lux, this is a really simple game, but at the same time there was a depth in the strategy and the decision making, which I really enjoyed. The resource management was fun. The artwork was amazing and maybe disturbing, depending on if you're Bethany or not. There's actually a sequel that's coming out as well called Impendium, so be sure to check that out from Dragon Egg Games. Yeah, so you guys, this was a fun one. We liked it a lot. All right, so if you want to follow all of our videos, be sure to subscribe. You can also find us on Facebook. We are Ryan and Bethany Board Game Reviews. We're on Instagram at Ryan and Bethany, and we're on Twitter at Ryan and Bethany 1. All right, you guys, thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.